Marples, Dr. Masnyk, and also Dr. Okeanov, and we're also inviting Dr. Zamostyan, Paula Zamostyan, who's the director of the United Nations Development Program for Chernobyl in Ukraine, to take part in the panel discussion on health. Dr. Irina Dardynskaia will moderate the panel, and the format will be that the first 20 minutes will be devoted to a internal discussion among the speakers, and the last 20-25 minutes will be open to the audience for questions.
We are starting our discussion, and because the first part of the day was devoted to health effects, I would like to pose the following question to all speakers. As you mentioned from the first presentation, there is a lot of discussions on health effects related specifically to Chernobyl radiation. And the first question I would like to pose to our panelists is, what do you think are the major radiation-induced consequences of Chernobyl accident, and what we could expect in the future? Dr. Masnyk, would you like to answer this?
Undoubtedly, cancer of the thyroid among children is already shown that there's a very important effect of radiation, worth attention, and perhaps looking into the other population, extending the screening, although some people believe screening is never cost-effective, followed by leukemia. I am afraid breast may be next. So solid tumors are only showing up, as was mentioned by Dr. Okeanov, on the Irina, and we are yet to see what direction this will take. I don't know even how to tackle the non-oncologic diseases, especially the psychiatric and neurologic complications. There's something for a specialist to handle. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe someone, Dr. Zamostyan, would you like to talk about this matter?
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, since I'm representing United Nations Development Program, a coordinating agency in the UN family for Chernobyl international assistance, I just would like to draw your attention to the several facts regarding the heavily criticized Chernobyl Forum findings. First of all, I encourage you to read the reports itself and not only press releases. Second, the Chernobyl Forum, and this is documented and proved by General Assembly resolution, and just yesterday by the special session of General Assembly devoted to Chernobyl, was the consensus of 8 United Nations agencies, not only EIA, and the 3 governments, Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus. The initiative had its terms of reference and fulfilled it. In spite of the scientific discussions regarding its findings, its authoritative opinion of well-known experts from Western world and from 3 affected countries. I would like also to encourage you to look through the list of authors of Chernobyl health consequences report and Greenpeace report mentioned today here. And please do not be surprised if you find the same authors in both inevitably contradictory reports. Concerning the questions, well, first of all, the the health impact of Chernobyl accident, which is not only a radiation accident, but has a number of other factors affecting human health other than radiation. From our point of view, it is possible to divide all these health consequences into three big groups. The first group is the health consequences or disorders which causation is clearly linked to radiation exposure. These are acute radiation syndrome and cataracta mentioned today. It's a thyroid gland cancer and most probably leukemia among highly exposed liquidators. Definitely this group of health problems need further follow-up and investigation. The second group is a quite large group of health effects, including malignant, cancers and other somatic effects among liquidators, evacuees, and residents of contaminated territories, causation of which with radiation exposure is still questionable because of lack of data and probably not enough follow-up period, still time behind us. And the causation of these health disorders still require careful investigation and research based on the internationally recognized research protocols. And the third group of health effects, we could, in this group, we could respect all kind of health problems and psychological or psychosomatic problems, relationship of which to radiation is rather unlikely, but it's very likely that all such or most of such disorders could be related to the accident itself and its non-radiological factors, such as psychological stress following resettlement, interventions administered, restrictions on human life, and exacerbated to a much extent by socioeconomic and other challenges caused by Soviet Union collapse and economic difficulties in the post-Soviet republics. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Marples would like to talk on this issue?
Yeah, I don't want to repeat what has already been said, but I would like to make a couple of comments. I think in regard to the overall question of health needs in the future, it's also quite evident that even without the Chernobyl disaster, there are massive health problems in the former Soviet Union, and particularly in these republics. There may be many reasons for that, and our colleague here suggested the economic and social factors may be a key one. Nevertheless, as well as determining which problems are caused by Chernobyl and which are not caused by Chernobyl, I think it's also important to keep in mind that there are really serious health problems in Ukraine and Belarus today. Just to give one example, maybe many people saw the Academy Award winning film Chernobyl Heart. My personal grouse, if you like, with that film was that there was no clear link made between Chernobyl and what was happening in that orphanage or psychiatric hospital. But there's no question, on the other hand, that no one has ever seen so many sick children in Belarus as there are today. So the question really is what to do about that. Regarding the Chernobyl Forum report, I also would concur that the press release doesn't reflect accurately or adequately the contents of the report. The report, it seems to me, is very thorough. And all the criticisms that I put in my talk today were of really what was a very naive, I think, and irresponsible press release. And I'm surprised that that kind of release really got issued. And my understanding is that even the author of the main table from which the figures were taken has refuted it herself and produced a new study. And the last point, I think, to be made as well about the psychological or psychosomatic effects of Chernobyl. Social economic factors are clearly, again, a problem. But I think also, and from people I've talked with over the years in Belarus and Ukraine, the disillusionment is often set in as well by not knowing who to believe, and misleading information, secrecy, speculations, rumors, various groups coming in and out of villages, treating them somewhat like guinea pigs in their own view. They're simply sick of it. And the majority of people there have some kind of sentiment that life is not going to get better no matter what. And I would say in that respect, the situation in the southern regions of Belarus is worse than I've seen anywhere. The lack of optimism, the feeling that they have to get their children out of that area, and if possible, even out of the entire environment of Belarus.
Thank you. Dr. Okeanov, please.
Если можно, тоже по-русски. Значит, меня несколько волнует как раз в этом основном, основополагающем документе Чернобыльского форума, что звучит вопрос о том, что не произошло такого страшного, как мы ожидали.
I'm very worried about the conclusions of Chernobyl Forum, that we did not have these consequences that we were expected to have.
Ну, во-первых, мы эти эффекты еще не знаем, и нам придется изучать их всю жизнь.
First, we don't know the effects, because it's too early to talk about the effects, and we have to study them almost all our life.
Во-вторых, эти заключения как бы отвлекают все время в сторону вот социальных эффектов и каких-то других, и оставляют за бортом тот радиационный эффект, который проявил себя и будет проявлять.
These conclusions basically are based mostly on social issues and other effects, like, for example, effects on neurological system of the people. But they are, from the point of view of Dr. Okeanov, they are taking our attention from the actual radiation factor, which was present at the time and after the Chernobyl accident.
Вот только два факта, которых можно привести значительно больше. Первый – это то, с чего я начинал свое выступление, это радиойод.
I would like to point you to two mostly recognized factors. For example, radioiodine, which is short-lived.
Не надо забывать, что 70 миллионов человек побывало под этим облаком.
We have not to forget that 70 million people was under this cloud.
Какие эффекты на сегодняшний день в здоровье проявляются? Так они вторичные после нарушения щитовидной железы.
And we could talk about the secondary effect of this exposure, secondary effects of this exposure. And we're not talking right now about thyroid cancers.
Так вот вопрос, что является первичным в данном случае? Вот эти нарушения щитовидной железы, которые как бы уже вторичны, или все-таки та радиация, которая к ним привела?
And we have to think about whether these effects, these secondary effects, are the result of the effects on the thyroid or directly the effects of the radiation.
Второй момент, что до сегодняшнего дня вкладываются государствами и Украиной, и Белоруссией огромные средства в том, чтобы реабилитировать эти загрязненные территории.
Until these days, a lot of resources are involved in order to decontaminate the territories which are, or rehabilitate the territories that were exposed, basically, that were contaminated.
Если сейчас государственные дотации снизятся для этих территорий, а это огромное количество удобрений и так далее в эти поля, то неизвестно, какую продукцию мы будем получать в будущем.
If we cut the resources for rehabilitation of these lands, in the future we have to pose the following question: what products or what food products we could receive from these territories?
И мы уже сегодня видим эти эффекты.
And in present we are seeing these effects.
Снизилось внимание к деконтаминации, и стали все больше и больше появляться загрязненных продуктов, и повышаются дозы внутреннего облучения населения.
And at present we are seeing these adverse effects. That means that we are not decontaminating our territories at the extent that we need to do this, and we are seeing increase of whole body doses, and we are seeing increase of incorporation of radioactive nuclides by population.
Поэтому реабилитация этих территорий – это не такая простая вещь. Вот вам и смешение факторов, пожалуйста, и экономических, и радиационных, и каких угодно других.
And because of this question is very complicated, because we have to think about economic consequences, we have to think about radiation consequences, etc. That means that we could receive the more ill population that we have previously.
Поэтому одно дело лозунги о контаминации территории, о том, что на этой территории можно жить и проживать. Да, можно, но с каким трудом и какими усилиями.
One thing is declaration you could live on these territories, but we have to understand for what extent or how complicated will be living at these territories.
Второе – это что же можно делать в плане реабилитации на этих территориях на сегодняшний день с медицинской точки зрения.
Secondly, we would like to think about what we have to do in relation to rehabilitation of these territories, which could be related to the health effects of the accident or health rehabilitation of the population.
Уже понятно, что риски снизить мы не можем никаким образом. Уже все, что можно было сделано по деконтаминации территории, оно сделано, а те риски, которые есть, они остаются, и вы видели, что они продолжают потихонечку нарастать.
For this moment, we cannot decrease the risk, because everything had been done in relation to decontamination of the territories, and a lot of things were done for prophylaxis of the diseases.
Для этой профилактики нужно организовывать на территориях серьезнейший скрининг прежде всего.
From the point of view of Dr. Okeanov, we have basically organized or established very good screening programs for population.
На сегодняшний день хороший скрининг организован только в отношении раков щитовидной железы.
For today, we have only very good screening procedures for thyroid cancer.
Для других форм рака это очень трудно сделать, и во всем мире сталкиваются с этой проблемой.
For other tumor sites or for other solid tumors, we cannot do the same thing. And a lot of people all over the world, they basically see complications in relation to low screening of the population.
Третий вопрос – это программы подготовки грамотности населения, которые, как показывает опыт, еще далеки от совершенства.
The third question is the programs of the education of basically people who are dealing with the consequences, and education of population, education of people who are specialists.
Вот сейчас мы сделали первый шаг в этом направлении, открыв такую филиал нашего университета при помощи Школы общественного здоровья Иллинойского университета в Хойниках, которая будет заниматься именно пропагандой новых современных знаний по радиоэкологической безопасности в регионе.
For now on, Institute of International Sakharov University open such center in Hoyniki region with the help of the University of Illinois School of Public Health Great Lakes Centers and grant provided to this university. And this first center will be taking care of education of population and modern education of the population and modern technique of education of population living in territories highly contaminated by radionuclides.
И особенно важно, мы будем проводить эту работу в первую очередь среди учителей средних школ, среди медицинских работников.
And we are planning to do first, or to deal with the teachers of the high school teachers and people who are involved in medical services for population. And basically school teachers.
Потому что именно они должны нести знания к людям, которые проживают на этих территориях.
Because from our point of view, they are the major persons who could provide adequate knowledge to the population who are living at these territories.
Ну, я не специалист в этой области, но вопрос постоянно остается открытым. Так что же выгоднее все-таки электроэнергия, получаемая от атомных станций, и ложится ли она в экономическом плане вот в те огромные вложения, которые понесла только наша страна?
And I would like to express my own opinion, what is the best, to have the atomic energy with all the priorities of the atomic energy or consequences that we have in a lot of countries.
И не нужно забывать, что для ликвидации в нашей только стране требуется 32 бюджета Беларуси. Сколько можно было построить за них атомных станций?
In order to avoid or in order to liquidate the consequences of Chernobyl accident, we need 32 budgets, yearly budgets of Belarus Republic in order to deal with these consequences. And we have to think how many power stations we could build with this money.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. For now on, basically, I was planning also to discuss several questions about prophylactic measures during the Chernobyl accident, and soon after the Chernobyl accident. But I understand that we have to basically ask the audience about your questions and about in relation to health effects or maybe public health effects or social consequences of the Chernobyl accident. And we have one microphone. And I would like to know whether you have questions for our speakers or for our panelists. And could you please name yourself? Not name.
I'm Andrew Pundy. I'm a local psychiatrist. The term liquidators is awkward in English as it has some cloak and dagger connotations. I wonder who you're referring to.
I could basically answer to this question because among radiation community, this is a term which is used in official scientific literature. When we are starting our presentation, I explained that liquidators are emergency workers who participated in relief operations during starting from 1986 through 1988, but basically these are people who were involved in emergency relief operations during this period of time. But this is well-known scientific term in the literature, radiation-related literature.
I think I would add to that, though, that you have a point, because it brings back memories of Stalin's policy of liquidating the kulaks as a class.
Yeah, yeah.
Good morning. This is for Dr. Rylchuk and Anya. As president of the Ukrainian Medical Association of North America, Illinois chapter, I'd like to congratulate you and your handpicked speakers and experts, which put on a really great collaborative effort today, as well as individually, all of you, which, including Drs. Marples, Rylchuk, Masnyk, Dardynskaia, Okeanov, Children of Chernobyl Foundation, and others who have done a lot of help to individuals and families affected by the world's worst nuclear industrial catastrophe. Your past, current work, and certainly future, your past and current work will have future positive continued ramifications. So, and I have a couple questions, one for Dr. Okeanov and then for Dr. Masnyk. Dr. Okeanov, and perhaps you can translate for him.
Yeah, I will.
There's a growing body of anecdotal and sometimes and scientific evidence in radiation biology that low-dose radiation exposure may have a positive stimulatory effect on the immune system and paradoxically a protective effect on some cancers, tumors, and other toxic health processes. In the literature, this is referred to as hormesis. In Ukrainian, it's hormaz, I don't know what it is in Russian. But perhaps you can comment on that if you know anything about that effect. And for Dr. Masnyk, could you please perhaps comment on why the health in the Chernobyl areas, based on your graph, especially of the incidence of breast cancer, seems surprisingly very significantly lower than the rest of Ukraine prior to the Chernobyl accident? It seemed that not just breast cancer, but other things that you had mentioned seemed significantly lower, making it think that Chernobyl was a very health-conscious kind of area, and the incidence of health maladies was significantly low compared to the rest of Ukraine. Thank you.
Maybe we will start with Dr. Masnyk, and I will be translating to Dr. Okeanov your first question.
Thank you. It is known that Polisia area around Chernobyl and west around the Pripyat River has been the lowest in terms of breast cancer rates in Ukraine for years. That's a statistic I've been given by people working in statistics. And I was only trying to show that it is now on an increase, meaning there is a delta. It's changing towards the greater numbers or higher incidence. And again, this is not necessarily evaluated diagnosis. This is demography straight from cancer registry. That could be another reason why it's lower here, and that is the reporting. The registries are coming from the reporting of local physicians. Obviously, there are fewer of them closer to Chernobyl. The service is not as good as down further towards Kyiv. Many possibilities of this being a just effect of the current data reporting and producing it through the registry. And the registry is relatively new. So please just remember that this is picking up, but still below the Ukrainian national level.
Please, Dr. Okeanov.
Что касается радиационного гармезиса, то тут существует много, в общем-то, противоречивых точек зрения на этот вопрос.
In relation to radiation hormesis, there are very controversial data on this issue. There exist controversial data on this issue.
Прежде всего, на сегодняшний день принята беспороговая теория, то есть самые малые дозы радиации могут приводить к негативным последствиям.
For now, we know that, not know, but we are thinking that there is no dose which is safe.
В основном явления гармезиса показывались на экспериментальных данных.
Basically, the data on hormesis came from experimental data, experimental research.
На людях эти исследования, в общем-то, нельзя считать завершенными и какими-то окончательными.
We don't know a valid data on radiation hormesis in relation to population or in relation to humans.
Кроме того, как правило, радиочувствительность животных и людей, они несопоставимы и трудно переносить это на человека.
And we have to tell that radiosensitivity of animals and radiosensitivity of humans is very different. And because of that, sometimes we cannot basically directly predict something in humans which is based on experiments with animals.
Во всяком случае, на сегодняшний день доказательств того, что радиация действует на человека негативным путем, значительно больше, чем доказательств гармезиса.
For now, we have more facts about negative influence of radiation on humans than we have positive results, such as hormesis. That means that we don't have a lot of information on hormesis and not a lot of positive results. Thank you.
May I add to my answer, since I just picked up some data that I had, but not in my head. The reports from Ukrainian Ministry of, I suppose, of Records, straight from the registry for last year, shows the following numbers. The rate of breast cancer per 100,000 among male population, 0.2. Among females, 30.6. That rate that for the year 2003, the last available material. The change from 2003, from 2000 to 2003, is on a decrease for male, minus 8.86. It still increases in female, among females, 2.54. And finally, the world standard is 0.02, just like the males in Ukraine, and females are 17.7, about half of the Ukrainian rate. And that is straight from the National Registry data.
Thank you. Please, your question.
Good afternoon. My name is Roman Barochin. I'd like to thank all the scientists and researchers for being here, and I'd like to thank you in your progress within the field. I believe this is very important for not just Belarus, but the knowledge of the entire world. And to that, I'd like to ask a two-part question. The first is, why did it take almost 20 years to instill education amongst the individuals in Belarus about the Chernobyl accident and what could be done to sort of rehabilitate the territories by the local population to sort of get a more mass accumulation of people and working together towards the bettering of said environment? And the second question is that I believe there was mentioned that it takes 28 sort of Belarus yearly salaries to deal with the problems of the accident.
Yeah.
And
32.
Yes.
32.
32. Pardon me. The other question that stands behind those 32 salaries is whether to build new power plants. Well, if you are to build new power plants, what are the new liabilities that are instilled on these power plants? And how are these liabilities to be carried out by these new upgrowths of power plants to sort of be responsible and prevent such problems from happening again?
And as
Thank
I understood, this is a question to Dr. Okeanov, yes?
Yes, the second question would be to Dr. Okeanov. The first question about sort of the education of the local populace and why it hasn't been done earlier, at least at a smaller scale. Why hasn't that been in place?
Okay. But this is for the whole panel. You would like to pose this
Correct.
question, the first one. Please, who would like to? Dr. Zamestyan, please.
In 2003-2004, United Nations commissioned, in cooperation with mainly the Swiss Development Cooperation Agency, commissioned the study called ICRIN, International Chernobyl Research and Information Network. The studies conducted in Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine simultaneously concluded that unfortunately the population of Chernobyl-affected territories is still lacking of the information they need to lead healthy and productive lives. People almost don't know nothing, and especially school teachers and local health workers and local administrators who usually operate with not adequate sources of information or actually using the the rumors as a source of information. The situation is basically a result of initial failure to inform the international community and the population about the accident itself, and the later failure to provide an advice how to protect health in the emergency situation. And again later, the situation when the Chernobyl accident was to some extent used by politicians to draw attention to the problem, to increase the activism of population, which was a positive effect, but at the same time, manipulation with data, exacerbating the possible health effects led to the situation that affected people just don't trust official sources of information even now. Thus, the importance of information delivery, importance of provision of reliable and most important, understandable information through trustful channels like local teachers, local health workers, administration and media is of paramount importance now to mitigate accident consequences. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to say a few things about this. It's the biggest problem we have been facing now for 15 years, is to get through to the people in the country. What's needed is the public health type education, screening necessity, led by local medical staff. When we first started, we had a 50% dropout of the invitations that we sent out into the country. Repeated invitations had very little effect. When we finally got our cohort running, we still had no shows to the extent of 30–40%, until we sent our scientists and their teams into the country, organized special seminars with local physicians in charge. Having the local physicians get interested, frankly by little payment, into spreading the word to their people. That was one part that helped us a little bit. And with all the effort we put in, every cycle we lose 10% of the active screenings. That's the lowest number worldwide, but still 10%. We have people moved back and forth and don't care to report anything, where they go and why they don't show up. The worst thing is, where we have very little effect, is when people need fine needle biopsy to find out is it a cancer or isn't it. Another 40–50% don't even care to show up. Education, ignorance, apathy, all of it together. A lot of work for Ministry of Health, and I have intervened several times with all ministers, and most recently even with Mrs. Yushchenko to do something about it. We'll see what happens.
I'd like to comment on your third question. It was about new liabilities for nuclear power stations. By the way, where's the guy who asked the question? Oh, okay. You moved. I think it's very interesting to note that on the eve of the collapse of the Soviet Union, virtually every nuclear power station in the former Soviet Union was opposed by thousands of people. In Lithuania, for example, people demonstrated against the Ignalina station, which in terms of capacity of reactors is 50% larger than the ones at Chernobyl. However, that nuclear power station provided 80% of Lithuania's electricity. Similarly, in Ukraine, nuclear power today is somewhere between 45% and 50%. And given the question of how much Ukraine is going to pay for gas and oil, there's logical reasons, I think, why Ukraine is seriously considering expanding nuclear power again. The same situation has been introduced in Belarus. There's a widespread debate now, when the moratorium ends in 2008, of building a nuclear power station in Belarus. And there's a certain bizarre logic to this, one of which is, why should Belarus worry about contamination from nuclear power stations when we're surrounded by them? We've got Ignalina at one side, we've got Smolensk at other, and there's the wreck of Chernobyl in the south, plus the nuclear power stations in western Ukraine. So it's a serious question. And although I think it can be argued that nuclear power has been operated irresponsibly for some time, it's not logical to suggest that every nuclear power station should suddenly be shut down because of Chernobyl, because every form of energy has its problems. And I don't know in the Ukrainian case where they're expected to go if this gas war continues. It's something that I think everyone should be considering right now.
And I would like to add on the topic of education of population, because I was the emergency worker in Belarus starting from 1987, and I participated in large team of physicians' efforts, and we were going to territories of 100 curie per square kilometers, and we were examining population in this area. But the major problem at this period of time was that the government did not want to educate no physicians, no population. For 10 or more years, basically it was a government policy not to tell the whole truth, because if you are telling the whole truth, you could have the consequences. That means that this was the policy. And after some period of time, after international community came, after we have a lot of publications in international journals on the consequences of Chernobyl accident, after that we were allowed to tell something. And the first director of the Institute of Radiation Medicine in Minsk, Professor Matyukhin, he told me once that at least I published everything. They did not allow us to tell something, but we published. But what I'm telling that they were not interested in education of physicians, and they were not interested in education of public. And then Dr. Okeanov will answer the second question.
Я имел в виду как раз-таки противоположное. Я хотел этим примером сказать, что огромная выгода, которая получается от десятков атомных станций, не в состоянии покрыть разрушение одной такой станции.
It was some misunderstanding of interpretation of the answer of Dr. Okeanov, because basically he was telling us that all pluses that we have from the atomic energy could be ruined because of one catastrophe or one accident of such extent.
То есть одна катастрофа перечеркивает десятки построенных и дающих энергию атомных станций. Об этом надо помнить и думать.
And this crosses basically all pluses from this atomic power industry.
И с другой стороны, это не только экономический эффект, но и все, о чем мы сегодня говорили.
And from the other hand, it's not only economic effect. And we were talking a little bit about social consequences, public health consequences to the population, but this is a huge effect, and we cannot predict what will be in the future.
Поэтому это большой на сегодняшний день, в общем-то, вопрос выбора для всего человечества. И вот из того урока, который нам преподала Чернобыльская станция, мы должны постараться эти выводы сделать.
And this is a choice for all mankind, whether we are choosing to go one or another direction. Okay. Thank you very much. We have the next panel around 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, and other people will be able, 4 o'clock, will be able to ask questions. Right now, the organizers are telling me that I have to...
You have a brief question?
Yeah, it's fairly brief. Dr. Dardynskaia said that no dose is a safe dose, and we've heard this argument before. There's a controversy on whether there's a correlation, a straight line correlation with dose, dangerous level of dose, even at extremely low levels. However, when we were studying radiation, we were made aware of the fact that there are areas in the world which have a fairly high, a much significantly higher background radiation because of manzanite sands, like in India and also in Brazil. And also people living at higher elevations are exposed to significantly more radiation. I was going to ask Dr. Masnyk if this factor was considered in the study of the cancers, the thyroid cancers, the effect of that there is some sort of a, I'd say a residual or a basic level of radiation which has to be factored into any kind of an analysis or epidemiological study of doses.
When we first got in to the family of people working on Chernobyl projects, our consultants and people that looked forward were the same ones that set up the Japanese program back in 51 or 52, spent years in building it up, and that's where their experience came. We were concerned with the effect of a single factor, an explosion and radiation blast from that explosion. We could not, nobody can handle the entire world with their specific radon or natural radiation, and whatever the people do and how they live there, it's a separate problem altogether. We were only concerned with the effect of Chernobyl accident.
And could I add? This was not the Dr. Dardynskaia explanation. It was translation made by Dr. Dardynskaia of the answer to the question by Dr. Okeanov. Okay. Thank you.
Please join me in thanking our panelists.